Welcome back to our channel where we share updates and untold stories about Catherine, Princess of Wales, and her royal family. Today we bring you some significant news: King Charles William and Camilla in turmoil. After Princess Anne exposed a hidden royal secret. Windsor in turmoil. Confidential document executed by Queen Elizabeth II triggers. Prince William's downfall, sparking an unprecedented succession crisis. During a closely guarded secret family dinner at Clarence House, the future of the British monarchy was plunged into unparalleled turmoil. Prince William, the Prince of Wales, allegedly fainted after receiving a concealed royal document personally signed by the late Queen Elizabeth II and handed to him by his aunt, Princess Anne. The contents of this letter, a well-guarded secret since the Queen's dying days, are said to contain discoveries so significant that they might undermine the very foundations of the House of Windsor and alter the line of succession. Sources with close knowledge of the events characterized the mood inside the old royal home as strangely oppressive on that fateful morning. Tensions exacerbated by the demands of a modernizing monarchy loomed over the gathered senior royals. King Charles III remained composed, but the Princess of Wales, Catherine, exhibited an unusual reticence. However, it was Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, whose pale and steadfast demeanor indicated that this was an extraordinary encounter. In a moment characterized as both premeditated and entirely unexpected, Princess Anne retrieved an item from her purse. She removed a solitary sealed parchment packet and put it intentionally on the polished oak table just before her nephew, Prince William. The ensuing hush was complete. Upon cracking the seal and perusing the first lines, the Prince of Wales's countenance became pallid. Witnesses saw that his respiration became shallow and irregular. He attempted to rise but stumbled backward, grasping the edge of the table for support. Subsequently, without a word, said his legs collapsed. He fell to the ground. Palace attendants hurriedly summoned medical personnel, their urgent requests reverberating throughout the elaborate chamber. The scene exhibited orchestrated chaos as personnel hurried to the prince's side. This was not only a fainting spell or a medical incident. The future king remained still, his visage concealed by his hands, his form convulsing with a sorrow that went beyond mere physical ailment. This constituted a comprehensive and utter disintegration, both corporeal and psychological. Amidst the turmoil, two people stood resolutely still. Princess Anne, her eyes brimming with tears, refrained from offering assistance. She stood like a lone sentinel, having executed the strike she had evidently feared for months. Across the chamber, King Charles ordered an attendant to close the doors, his expression one of rage and concern. The Princess of Wales knelt alongside her husband, her countenance marked by a dread indicative of a crisis much more profound than a mere medical issue. The document rested in the center of the table. The royal seal was broken, although its whole contents remained unexamined by anybody else present in the room. A message, an edict, a confession, its actual essence, remained enigmatic. The only clarity pertained to its origin. It had been maintained in complete secret since the closing days of Queen Elizabeth II, concealed not just from the public, but also from the rightful successors to the throne. The most urgent issue still unanswered in the oppressive atmosphere. Why had Princess Anne, the monarchy's most steadfast and devoted servant, retained it for so long? What secret could possess such power as to subjugate the heir to the throne? Although the official palace statement would subsequently characterize the incident as a transitory bout of dizziness resulting from fatigue behind the secure confines of Clarence House. Prince William's fall initiated a sequence of events that compelled the House of Windsor to face its most profoundly concealed realities. The guardian of a contaminated goblet, Princess Anne's responsibility for months, Princess Anne harbored a secret she had vowed to her deceased mother to keep until her own death. The responsibility was imposed upon her, gradually unfolding inside the revered, quiet halls of Balmoral Castle. Weeks after the Queen's ceremonial burial, the Princess Royal went to the Scottish estate not just as a mourning daughter, but also as a steward of her mother's unresolved affairs. She was responsible for aiding with the archiving of the Queen's personal belongings, a job she approached with her usual thoroughness. Within the dusty corridors of the estate's exclusive archive, a realm seldom accessed, she uncovered the revelation. Concealed among boxes of antiquated ledgers and ceremonial documents, Anne discovered an incongruous object, a plain, unadorned wooden chest. The lock remained unbroken, and its existence was completely unknown. It was absent from all inventories, both royal and private. It remained in place as if anticipating her gaze exclusively. Utilizing a key discovered in a distinct box of her mother's personal possessions, she opened the chest. Within her heart ceased to beat. A bundle of old paper bound with a plain ribbon and sealed with the Queen's personal symbol rested on a bed of velvet. The first letter displayed her mother's distinctive, graceful handwriting. It stated, "Confidential. For my son's eyes only." However, the unsettling ambiguity resided in the unarticulated inquiry whose son, underneath the enigmatic statement, were sheets of delicate aged paper inscribed with meticulous intentional handwriting. These were not frivolous reflections or sentimental goodbyes. These constituted commands, disclosures, and confessions. This was the Queen not as a sovereign addressing her realm, but as a mother, a grandmother, and the custodian of truths too dangerous to have ever been spoken. As Anne read line after meticulous line, the color faded from her face. The contents of those documents might either sustain the monarchy to which she had devoted her life or destroy it entirely. She now bore a burden that may dismantle the meticulously crafted facade of togetherness the world urgently had to maintain. Subsequent nights she grappled with an insurmountable decision. Should she comply with her mother's concealed desire, or should she save the institution and the family she loved from a reality that may irreparably harm them? Her sleep diminished, exacerbating her already reticent disposition. The burden of the letter alienated her, severing her connection to those she was obligated to safeguard. She ultimately had the resolve to disclose her concerns to her brother, the king. During a difficult meeting, she referenced the finding of a sensitive, private document. Charles's response was immediate and incisive. "Leave the past buried, Anne." He allegedly said, his voice tinged with an unusual note of anxiety. "What benefit may arise from reopening past traumas? The institution must anticipate the future." However, Anne remained unconvinced. She saw a glimmer of trepidation in her brother's eyes, not about the content of the letter pertaining to the past, but concerning whoever it may reveal in the present. She had devoted her life to becoming the monarchy's unvoiced sentinel. Amidst the problems surrounding her brothers, she remained a paragon of responsibility and stability. However, this letter jeopardized the very foundation she had devoted much effort to uphold. This transcended the preservation of a heritage. It became a matter of addressing a reality. She now recognized that the truth had a name, one that astonished her, and caused her to pause. What instilled the most fear in Anne was not just the content of the letter, but the person it identified and the implications it had for the future of the monarchy. The royal edict. A challenge to the monarchy and its consort. The item unearthed by Princess Anne was neither a journal entry nor a nostalgic recollection. The letter was official, bearing the royal crest, and signed in the distinctive hand of Elizabeth II. It constituted a legacy amendment, a notion unprecedented in contemporary royal history, but articulated with the unequivocal authority of a monarch's last directive. The communication was directed not to Parliament or the public, but rather to her family, with a portion expressly designated for Prince William. In the first lines, the Queen challenged the conventional hierarchy of royal succession, not from a legal perspective, but from a moral and philosophical one. The paper recognized an increasing disparity between the monarchy's public image and the private reality she had governed. The first catastrophic strike occurred directly challenging Queen Camilla's throne. For years, the public was directed by a well-crafted narrative suggesting that Queen Elizabeth had graciously welcomed Camilla's ascension from royal mistress to queen consort. Orchestrated public displays, nuanced endorsements, and well-composed news releases depicted an image of family cohesion and reconciliation. However, inside the confines of the palace, the Queen's correspondence exposed a markedly contrasting reality. Elizabeth II had never really bestowed her secret endorsement. Her statements were calculated but incisive. Respect, she said, differs from trust. She subsequently cited a confidential pact established in 2005, a prerequisite for Charles's marriage with Camilla. This pact, known just to a select few inside the royal inner circle, was the Queen's demand. Worried about public dissent and the Crown's integrity during the terrible period of Diana's death, she instituted stringent restrictions. Camilla was designated to be referred to as Princess Consort upon Charles's ascension rather than Queen. She would not acquire the whole ceremonial or constitutional authority of a Queen Consort. At that point, Charles had earnestly consented. However, the letter indicates that the agreement has been methodically undermined over the years, not inadvertently, but intentionally. The Queen articulated with evident disappointment how Camilla, with Charles's implicit consent, had eroded such limits. She established clandestine friendships with top courtiers, used amicable media, and staged a gradual effort to normalize the concept of her impending queenship. The Queen observed silently, anticipating that her son would uphold their confidential agreement. However, as the years progressed, her quiet transformed into deep disappointment. In her concluding months, Elizabeth disclosed in the letter that the agreement had been irrevocably violated. Consequently, she said the sovereign was entitled to withdraw her approval. The letter included directives and a moral need for her successor William to rectify this transgression. It indicated that should Camilla's ascension to queen occur without renewed formal approval from the new monarch and parliament, her titles would be subject to formal review and, if warranted, rescission. This directive was directed not at the reigning king but at his successor, a final attempt to rectify what she perceived as a deviation from the foundational principles of the crown. Princess Anne harbored this information with subdued indignation. Observing the coronation, witnessing Camilla being crowned alongside Charles seemed to her like a blatant violation of her mother's last confidential desires. She had tightened her jaw, smiled for the cameras, and fulfilled her obligation. Up to this point. As William contemplated these words linking the Queen's concealed animosity with the public reality he had contributed to normalizing, he had a surge of nausea. He had unwittingly participated in the deceit. However, this astonishing discovery was not the actual catalyst for his breakdown. The revelation that dismantled his reality was concealed inside the letter's last impactful line. The concealed heir. A revelation that reshapes the monarchical lineage. The last piece of the letter was briefer than the preceding portions, lacking in verbiage, but profound in impact. It started with a statement that seemed implausible, a phrase that contradicted the whole recorded history of the Windsor dynasty. There exists an additional son. Queen Elizabeth's handwriting quivered somewhat on these phrases, suggesting that even she, in the confidentiality of her last testament, found it hard to inscribe the truth onto paper. She recounted a moment from decades past characterized by significant personal upheaval and political strain, when a clandestine connection flourished, one that was never intended to be revealed. The outcome of this covert coupling was a son born in complete secret and reared wholly outside the royal confines, his existence expunged from all official documentation. His existence had been obscured by layers of procedure and what the Queen referred to as a requisite shame. However, she had not forgotten. She was never able to. She had maintained a file, a compilation of papers concealed inside the same chest that Anne had discovered at Balmoral. This file included medical data, a birth certificate, and copies of correspondence between the Queen and the boy's guardian, a devoted servant of the Crown, who had vowed complete confidentiality. A photograph existed, a grainy black-and-white photograph of a guy in his late 50s with piercing blue eyes and a sharply defined jawline that is unmistakably recognizable. William gazed at the photograph, breath escaping his lungs. The likeness was eerie not just to his grandma, but disturbingly to himself. Subsequently, the second impact occurred. The Queen disclosed that Princess Anne was aware. Not from the outset, but from a time years before when she was discreetly called upon to safeguard the family from this particular secret. The guy, the Queen's concealed son, encountered small difficulties that jeopardized the revelation of his identity. To avert a worldwide scandal, Anne intervened. She had orchestrated his relocation, altered his identity once again, and ensured his life remained forever concealed from public scrutiny. The agreement preserved the monarchy's integrity. The Queen admitted in her correspondence that she had contemplated presenting him on several occasions during the years. However, fear had consistently hindered her. Apprehension over the media trepidation for Charles's response, and primarily anxiety about the implications for the line of succession. If this guy were really her son born before Charles Andrew or Edward, then according to the ancient norms of male preference primogeniture that prevailed throughout much of her reign, his claim to the throne would by lineage surpass theirs. The notion shattered something profound inside William. Every recollection, every lesson in obligation, every regal expectation he had ever borne now seemed fraudulent. His whole existence and fate had been based on a lie of omission. The burden of the crown he had dedicated his life to donning now seemed like an overwhelming betrayal. He was not the unequivocal successor. He was the successor of a well-crafted, unfinished narrative. Nevertheless, the letter had one additional remarkable twist. It did not only disclose the truth, it militarized it. The Queen's last directive was addressed not to William, but to Anne. She was to function as the adjudicator of this reality, tasked with determining whether to maintain the monarchy in its current form or to reinstate a lineage long overlooked. For the first time in contemporary history, a princess royal will exercise the authority of a sovereign. The princess royal's selection and the prince's disintegration. The weight of the decision rested on Princess Anne's shoulders like a heavy crown of lead. In the aftermath of her revelation, she vanished from the public eye, cloaking herself in the guise of royal obligation, while secretly suffering an anguish beyond the understanding of others. The Queen's letter provided no advice, simply commands. It was not a solicitation. It was a delegation of responsibility. Only Anne has the authority to dictate the future. The paper may be upheld by her declaration, or it could be incinerated, its secrets disappearing eternally. Her thoughts were conflicted. On one side was her steadfast allegiance to her mother and the institution she represented. Conversely, there was an unarticulated connection she had for William, a nephew she had seen transform into a committed and honorable person, now living in the shadow of a kingdom that may not legitimately belong to him. The veracity was perilous. However, she determined that silence was a betrayal of her own conscience. Her last encounter with King Charles was, as one account characterized it, volcanic. Upon revealing the whole extent of the document to him confidentially, his response was one of icy wrath. "This is insanity. Treason," he reportedly snarled. She was unwell and disoriented. That letter should never have been revealed. However, Anne saw the underlying anxiety underneath his bravado. He was not just safeguarding the monarchy, he was also preserving his own sovereignty and Camilla's status. Subsequently, Queen Camilla confronted Anne in a secluded passage of Buckingham Palace. Her demeanor was not dignified, it was frantic. She implored, she menaced, and she lamented. "You will obliterate all that we have constructed," she said. Anne refrained from speaking. Her decision was already made. There would be no committee, no discussion, and no disclosure to the media. She would adhere to her mother's instructions meticulously. She drove to Clarence's house and handed the paper immediately to William. She saw the inquiry in his gaze, although he refrained from articulating it. He gazed at his aunt and realized that his life was on the verge of transformation. Anne pivoted and departed before his fingers could rupture the barrier. She comprehended the consequences of her actions. As William unrolled the paper and his gaze traversed the ominous lines, his palms began to quiver. The remarks on Camilla were astonishing. The revelations about the concealed son were seismic. His whole identity, founded on the principles of heritage and fate, disintegrated into nothingness. At that time, his body succumbed to the overwhelming psychological turmoil. The consequences: a prince in solitude, a monarchy in turmoil. For the following 5 days, Prince William was absent. Following his revival and the confirmation of his physical well-being by medical professionals, he sought absolute solitude at his Adelaide Cottage residence in Windsor. He isolated himself from the world. He declined all communication and annulled all public engagements. Neither Catherine nor Anne nor the king was permitted entry. His children were apart, protected from the quiet turmoil that had consumed their father. His stillness intensified with each passing hour, reverberating through the corridors of authority. Beyond the gates, the world saw the void. The media started extensive speculation. Was the prince afflicted with a grave illness? Was there a significant family emergency? The paparazzi monitored all entrances to Windsor, although no information was obtained. Within such enclosed confines, William was not at ease. He was dismantling and reassembling his world. Each word in that letter tormented him. The truth had pierced his regal identity like a dagger. He recognized that he could not remain concealed indefinitely. Silence was not permissible. His subsequent decision would determine the destiny of the royal lineage. William reappeared after 5 days. He was no longer the same individual who had embarked on his self-imposed isolation. He seemed pallid, but controlled his hands, unwavering, his gaze imbued with a determination that went beyond mere obligation. It constituted acceptance. The storm had traversed him, and while it had inflicted wounds, it had not shattered him. It had shown his true identity under the ornate facade of heritage. On the same day, behind secured doors, William composed his own secret correspondence. The correspondence was directed not to the palace, but explicitly to the Prime Minister and the Speaker of the House of Commons. The contents remain undisclosed to this day. However, their transmission elicited subtle shockwaves throughout the upper echelons of government. During a confidential meeting with Princess Anne, he positioned his grandmother's letter on the table between them. "I shall bear this truth," he said to her, his tone steady. "However, I shall not be defeated by it." It was not an acquiescence. It was an agreement. For the first time in years, Anne allowed her emotions to flow unrestrained. She had imposed a significant load upon him, but he opted for neither revenge nor denial, but rather a rare and challenging grace. Several days later, he went alone to a secluded rural home. The individual from the photograph, the Queen's concealed son, awaited him there. The two guys, who were half-brothers, conversed for many hours. No titles were conferred, nor were any assurances of official acknowledgement given. Upon his departure, William presented the guy with an envelope bearing an official family crest and a handwritten message extending an invitation to an upcoming secret royal assembly away from public scrutiny, yet inside the inner circle. In London, transformation started in modest but substantial increments. Queen Camilla was discreetly relieved of one of her principal ceremonial responsibilities without any public declaration. No explanation was provided. However, inside the palace confines, the message was unequivocal. A significant transformation had taken place. A boundary had been established. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, remained steadfastly at his side throughout the ordeal. She had perused the letter. She had experienced its pain. However, her comments to her husband penetrated the obscurity of his situation. "You were destined to lead," she allegedly said to him. "Not due to a Graf's trajectory, but because of your identity." The conclusive statement, an echo from the archive. As the situation started to stabilize, a last twist emerged. An audio tape recorded during the Queen's dying days was found in a secret vault at Windsor. Anne discovered it concealed inside a little leather purse inscribed just with the letters ER. It was absent from all wills and official documents. It was intimate, unrefined, and intended just for one recipient, William. Tormented by past events, Anne chose to listen first. It was more than a mere goodbye. It was a conclusive judgment. "My dearest William," started the Queen's voice, delicate but exact. She referred to him as her anchor to the future. Subsequently, she confronted the concealed realities, the infidelity, the offspring, the agreement with Anne, and the torment of seeing her family disintegrate. "There are matters I was too apprehensive to articulate in life," she said, her voice laden with anguish. "That constitutes my paramount regret. However, William, you possess the opportunity to choose an alternative choice." She did not designate the concealed son as heir. Instead, she executed a considerably more potent action. She designated William as king not by lineage, but by virtue. "I have confided in Anne with the truth, as she has consistently been my weapon," the Queen said. "However, William, you are my heart. The truth has the capacity to either dismantle an individual or to forge a sovereign. You were nurtured not to attain perfection, but to cultivate resilience. I recognize your challenges, and I have faith in your resilience." It was a benediction, an endowment that had more significance than any statute or diadem. Catherine listened to the recording, then entered the room where William was seated and presented him with the cassette. "She left this for you," was her only statement. William remained still listening until the last words dissipated. Subsequently, for the first time since his breakdown, he shed tears. Not for the deceit or the bereavement, but for the grandmother who bore it all in quiet, and for the crown she eventually in her own manner bestowed upon his spirit. The monarchy persists. However, underneath its refined exterior is a letter, a recording, and a secret that has irrevocably transformed the House of Windsor. The line of succession is preserved in theory, although it is now influenced by a reality understood by only a select few, a reality that demonstrates that a crown is determined not just by lineage, but by the qualities of the one designated to don it. Thank you for watching the video. Please let us know your thoughts and goodbye for now.